Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're so excited to have you. We are at the Remember That Soft Skills Are Crucial in Cybersecurity webinar. I am thrilled to have Dr. Costas Torregas join us, as well as Brian McCombs and Jane Rayner. They are going to be sharing some awesome expertise about soft skills in industry. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Costas. And before we leave, make sure that you are joining us for the other Spirit Week events that we're going to be having for the rest of the week. All right, Costas, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Emily. So, hi, everybody. I know you must be exhausted by now. 2 weeks of successive, constant beatings against the wall. But I know that all of you excelled. All of you did better than last year, better than last season. And you're ready to hear the announcements Friday of best team and then to see the leaderboard. I'm delighted to welcome Ryan McCombs and Jane Renick from industry that are going to help us crack this very difficult Rubik's Cube of what are the real important soft skills that hiring managers and technical managers look for when you knock on the door of industry. To ground the conversation, I wanted to reference a paper. Doc Sinclair, who's the chair of the National Cyber League, wrote a paper a couple of years ago, having interviewed a couple of hundred industry leaders, asking questions like, "Are you satisfied with recent cybersecurity graduates?" And two things stood out. One is, in terms of technical skills, yeah, about three-quarters of them said, yeah, we were very much satisfied. But when it came to the softer skills that they were looking for, there was much less satisfaction. So if there's less satisfaction from industry, we have two industry people right here in front of us. I've asked them to kind of think a little bit about put themselves in your position, knocking on the door, saying, I want a job, and then thinking about technical skills versus soft skills, managerial skills, teamwork skills. What does that mean? How do you measure it? How do you test against it? And what's the reality in the two companies that they represent? So I'm going to ask Jane to go first, Ryan to go second. Jane, would you mind just introducing yourself, placing yourself in your company, and then sharing some ideas with the audience about the soft skill dilemma? Thanks so much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Costas. So, my name's Jane Rayner, and I've been in IT and security for about 13 years now. So, I started out working at the college I was attending, uh, doing help desk work. So, we're answering phones, resetting passwords, many of the simple things that happen in the day to day. And ended up transitioning from that into engineering roles and into IT management, into where I am now. So I currently work in vulnerability remediation for GM Financial, which is the financial arm for General Motors. And so I think what's really, allowed me to take on many of these different roles and be successful in them wasn't often my technical ability, but it was my soft skills that allowed that and made that happen. So, the way that plays into a lot of it today is going to be, it's how I negotiate the remediation timelines and explain the business needs, you know, within cyber, but also explain to the business why we need, this piece of security. So, there was a few that I wanted to highlight that I think we probably use the most and in different ways. And one of the first ones, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to call it because it was communication and adaptability. It wasn't that any one of them was separate, but it was often how we communicated in different contexts. So, we're talking to each other, and the way I talk to, my brother or my sister versus the way I talk to a colleague, is already so different. I think many of you do that today, right? Like we talk to our friends differently. And I think that transitions very much into the workplace. So when you're talking to somebody else who's technical, you may provide, significantly more technical detail. But when you start moving up to management, they want to know why it's not working. They don't want all the details. They want the important piece of why this isn't working. let's stop it there and keep going. But then even as you move higher up in the organization, say you're talking to a C-level executive, then I think their concern is, okay, how much is this going to cost me? Why do I need it? And is there another way I can do it? And so you're trying to communicate what those priorities are and why that should be their priority as well. And the way we do that sounds different to everybody. So, I really wanted to highlight that communication piece. And, you have to be so adaptable to your audience at the time, especially, one of the things that I've come to notice. So, General Motors is a global company. We're often working with people in various countries who, they may sound different to us. Sometimes there's language barriers and you're waiting on translation. Sometimes there's different acronyms. You never know what you're really going to encounter that day. And so you have to be willing to communicate and explain things in a way that you think they're going to understand, and take a step back and say, okay, well, maybe I didn't explain this the best. Can I try it this way? Which really leads me into the next soft skill that I thought was so important, was integrity. I think it's easy a lot of times to want to assume that we're right and assume that what we're saying makes sense. But it's so important to take a step back sometimes and say, hey, maybe I got this wrong. Can you tell me your side of this? Can you explain this to me? And when we're willing to sit back and listen and hear their side and try to understand their point of view, oftentimes that gives us a better understanding. But then we're also able to explain our priorities, and they're even more receptive to listening at that time. So, I will say too, stole that one a little bit from GMF. So that's one of the core values. And I think that's made, it really makes a huge difference with being there, because we're able to, you're spending time with people that you trust and you want to work with. I think the last, but surely not least, soft skill that I thought was so important was empathy. So oftentimes I think we just need to show that we care. So when we're trying to accomplish various security goals, we're not sitting here just simply saying, you need to do this because you need to do this, and, trying to make people do the things they don't want to. We're doing it ultimately to empower the business. It's not to, tell people that they're doing wrong. And so I think when we put ourselves in the other team's shoe, then, we can tell them that, oh, okay, yeah, your concerns are valid, but here's what we can do to move forward from that. And, when people see that you care and you're not just trying to be mean, I think they often are much more receptive to help you accomplish those. I think oftentimes back to some of the incidents that I've worked, because maybe somebody didn't patch something they were supposed to, or they clicked on a phishing link even though they've been in all this training, right? And you don't have to go and tell them, hey, you need to feel really bad about this because you shouldn't have done this. They oftentimes, they don't necessarily want to tell you right away because they're embarrassed and they feel bad. And so, when you show a little bit of empathy and tell them, hey, yeah, this isn't fun, I'm so sorry, but, what information can you tell me? And when you're able to work together with them, I find that it really speeds up the time that it takes to get to a resolution and remediation, but it also makes for a much more enjoyable experience. But, and I'll leave it off to Ryan from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. And a lot of things you said are resonating. I've been taking little notes. I want to come back to it because after Ryan speaks, we'll have a chance to kind of talk, all three of us together, and maybe probe some of the things you raised, which are excellent points, in more depth. So Ryan, over to you. Would you introduce yourself, your position in the company, and then launch into a bit of a presentation? Go ahead.
Thanks, Costas. Hello, folks. My name is Ryan McCombs. I'm a senior manager of incident response within CrowdStrike, within particularly the professional services division. So I'm actually a consultant. Customers call us when they are having their worst day in their company's existence. They've been hacked. It could be a ransomware event. It could be a nation state activity. It could be as simple as a business email compromise and millions of dollars have walked out the door. It's imperative for us within a consultant space to have really solid soft skills to be able to navigate the ambiguity of these situations as they come in every day. We walk into situations where networks are down hard. Nobody's able to conduct any business. And we have to work through with that customer to be able to get them operational again. Part of what we need to accomplish is an understanding, and you need to have some empathy, as Jane was mentioning, to be able to get that understanding of the situation, who the players are, and how to best bring these customers back to a semblance of normal business. That is our goal within CrowdStrike Services in an incident response capacity, to be able to get these businesses back and operational. So when I was ruminating on how I wanted to kind of navigate this conversation, one of the first things that came to mind, and Jane had kind of touched on this very briefly, is knowing your audience. I was sitting there and I was thinking of how I wanted to kind of broach this subject. And I think most of us are pretty competent in being able to accomplish this activity. But I remember back in the day when I first started my career 10 years ago at CrowdStrike, was my children, 4 years old, asking me, "Dad, what do you do for work?" How do you explain to a 4-year-old the complexity of cybersecurity and especially digital forensics and incident response to a 4-year-old? I'm not going to give it away in terms of what I said to them, but my point being is that you're going to handle different types of individuals in your communications. They could be extremely technical. They may know more than you on a particular subject, but they're coming to you for guidance and inspiration. And so you're going to have to tailor your messaging particularly to that audience that you're speaking to. But I don't want to leave out another really crucial soft skill that's utterly imperative to digital forensics and incident response, and that's reports. Writing is an absolutely critical soft skill that we have. If you're in the red team space, if you're conducting DFIR, if you're doing vulnerability management, the written word is going to be utterly critical to your job. The reason being is that in a digital forensics and incident response capacity, we need to document all of the facts as they happened for that particular incident. There's numerous reasons for that. It could be legal, could be financial. It could be they just want to know for future reference so that they can learn from it. Either way, you're going to have to establish what the facts were in that particular incident using your technical abilities. How do you do that? You got to put a narrative together. What did the bad guy do? How did they get in? What did they accomplish while they were in there? Why did they leave if they left? These are all the types of questions that you need to be asking yourself as you're navigating an incident. And that's absolutely critical to the success of your organization. The quality of your writing is going to be imperative in the professional space. And that includes emails. I know everybody loves sending out 1,000 emails, but being clear and concise in your writing is going to be heading off potential issues or future questions. So I have 3 things. Jane ran through a list of a number of soft skills that she found important, but I'm going to give you 3 items as a recipe for how to effectively establish your soft skills. First one is stay calm. Everyone's got imposter syndrome. I have it. I'm sure Jane's got it. I'm sure Costas has it as well. To a degree, we know what we don't know, and that makes us nervous, and we feel like imposters. It's okay. Subject matter experts are only subject matter experts because they know more than the average person on a particular topic. You can be a subject matter expert and have people come to you. Jane mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to kind of use a different set of words for it is honesty. Be honest. When we're running through an incident in a DFIR capacity, at the end of the day, you're not necessarily going to have all the answers. Cyber is just way too broad of a field. I'm not an expert in Active Directory. I am not an expert in cloud technologies. I know a little bit about everything. But you need to be honest, even if you don't have all of the answers. That kind of leads us back to stay calm. And lastly, be thoughtful, be intentional. What do you know? What don't you know? And what are you trying to do to figure out what you don't know? These are all types of questions that I'm constantly asking myself when I'm dealing with an incident with a customer. What do I know about the current situation? Well, if I don't have an answer, that leads me down a particular investigative path that I want to accomplish. Questions lead us to action. And to establish what you don't know allows you to take action in a particular direction. So I just want to end with what I told my children. Dad kicks bad guys out of computers. It's as simple as that for some consumption capability for your audience. Thanks, Doctor. Back to you.
Very good. Excellent. Well, this is a great round of introductory remarks, and both of you have done a great job of giving very succinct advice. I'm reminded in the fire departments around the country, they do something called hot wash. After every fire, all the commanders and all the firefighters get together in a room and kind of critique the fire. You both mentioned the fact that you can't kind of go after beating people up. You made a mistake. It's vitally important, though, to understand what happened and how it happened, and that takes communication skills. And both of you have given us kind of a way to look at those communication skills. So let's start. First of all, we have already a comment in the chat. Someone who's a recent AAS graduate, interested in applying skills to cybersecurity, non-traditional student, experience with help desk and training, and his or her skills: communication, presentation, diplomacy, rather than say coding. How do I emphasize to hiring managers what I can bring to their team in the way of written communication and training capabilities? Thoughts that might help T. Vanderheiden.
Let's see. I can take that one if you want, Ryan.
Go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, so I think, at least in my opinion, the first piece I want to talk on is transferable skills. So just as you listed out there, hey, I may not be the best at coding, but I'm really good at diplomacy. Oftentimes we need to spell that out for employers, and we need to tell them, hey, this is what I'm good at, and this is maybe an area I can work on, but then also highlight this is what I'm doing to work on those weaknesses. I don't think I've ever encountered an employer or teammate that said, I expect you to know everything and I expect you to be great at everything. Rather, the typical message is more, okay, what are you good at? How can we utilize that to the best in the team? And then, what can we do to work on those weaknesses? And so it's kind of taking that team approach to it, as opposed to just saying, oh, I don't know, and stopping there. But as you're able to highlight how those skills can be, transferred to cybersecurity, and you go from there, I think it really makes employers much more receptive to the idea of you transitioning into the role.
Jane, let me ask you to further kind of define for me and for the audience communication, presentation, diplomacy. How do you prove that you're good at that? You can say it, but do you have any advice as to how to kind of document it, to show it, to prove it?
Yeah, so I find that when you're able to give examples, maybe how what are some situations that you've encountered that you've used diplomacy in the past that tell you, hey, this is what makes me pretty good at this. Here's an example or two. And I think as you're able to show real life examples of it, then they start to notice it and pick up on it and view it differently.
Great, great. Ryan, I have a question queuing up for you, but do you have some thoughts on the question that Jane helped focus on?
Yeah, one of the things that we find extremely effective in the consultant space is providing narratives, becoming a storyteller.
Mm.
When you're able to take your activities in life, your experiences, your expertise, and you're able to effectuate a story around it and gather that rapture from that rapt attention from whoever you're speaking with, can keep them. It will keep them in the forefront of your mind. You'll be in the forefront of their mind when they're conversing about you later for potential opportunities. Being memorable is half the game, and putting together your expertise in a consumable manner, via a narrative or a story, can be extremely effective as you're navigating through the process.
Yeah, great advice. So, Eno Danowski has a question for you. Um, he apparently is in your field.
Yes, yes.
Right.
I actually know Eno. Yeah.
Very good. So maybe this is softball.
Yeah. He didn't give me a softball. This is very telling. So Eno, from your perspective, right? You've likely got a tracker with a bunch of information in it, a bunch of technical information, and it goes back to that narrative storytelling. How did what occur from those technical bullet points, navigate into a story? What did the bad guy do? What did they do first? What did they do second? What did they do third? And being detail oriented in those particular activities sets up a better review process for your reports at a later time. Mm. It's tough when you're not the only analyst on a particular investigation. You've got different parts of the story that you're seeing. That's why you've got all that information centralized into a single source like a tracker, so that you can put that information together in that nice flowing storytelling mode. And what's great is when you're navigating through that process, it'll actually help you become a better analyst, because if you've identified a gap in the story, you've identified a gap in the analysis. And then you've got to go back and conduct additional analysis to fill in that hole within that story. So it's important to use. I hate, none of us liked taking English class when we were in school. I'm the first one to admit it. But using, proper English in the way that you're navigating through your reporting puts together the story in a nice flowing manner so that you can effectively navigate those review processes.
Yeah. In a sense, I want to offer kind of a visual. When you're doing incident report, or if you're trying to organize a report to management, you're like a car whose engine is running and whose wheel is spinning constantly. But you can't just take that spinning wheel and shift gears and run off. You have something called a gearbox, and the gearbox slows down the rotations into a speed that makes sense for where you are, the speed you want, and so on. In the same way, when you're trying to write something, think of a gearbox. You know a lot. You've seen a lot. You got lots of technical stuff, a lot of suppositions, hypotheses. Your job is not so much to tell everything, but to find the right gear for the audience you're addressing. Not for everybody, but for the audience you're addressing. And it could be that a report to Mr. A is different from a report to Ms. B, because they are preoccupied with different things. And you need to somehow read their minds and figure out what is it that they want me to address, not what is it that I want to address. So get behind the actual person you're reporting to and try to imagine what they want to hear, not the solution, but what kinds of information they want. And I think both our speakers have really been very clear on that. Does that make sense? As an analogy, that you have to kind of somehow filter down information that you know. Right. I wanted to address something totally different. So, Ryan, Jane, anything on this particular topic of report writing?
Just wanted to clarify one additional thing too. Costas, you said it very well, which is knowing your audience for how you're developing that particular report. And I can't tell you how the DFIR space it's so critical for that, because you're writing reports for law firms, you're writing them for insurance companies, you're writing them for end customers. And all of them have different needs that need to be met with that single document. And how can you incorporate all of those requirements into your particular, report that you're working on? It's not an easy skill to have, and that's why your communication with all of those parties is utterly critical, so that you can ensure that you're meeting their requirements, so that you don't have to go back to the drawing board over and over and over again and impacting your company's bottom line, because that takes time away from you doing other types of work. So it's very important that you're understanding who your audience is going to be, so that you can effectuate their requirements into that document.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jane.
I can say too, on my side, it looks a little different, so I'm not necessarily writing incident reports, but we're often having to convey and communicate information around vulnerabilities, and we have to tell the story of it, like what teams are making good progress, what teams, may need some extra help and assistance, and, what's maybe happening there. And so depending on who we're actually presenting to, that may look very different. So we may have a detailed technical report that maybe we're sending off to an engineer, but that could also look like a Power BI dashboard that's real pretty for some executives. And then sometimes it also just looks like a PowerPoint that's one slide, and you've got a 2-minute speech to present that and try to get your message across.
Let's turn our attention to something that's kind of terrorizing most students, which is the interview. So, you've got your best dress on, your best tie on, suit, whatever, and you knock on the door and you're going to go into an interview, face-to-face, virtual, what have you. You've only got maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes before the impression you establish is forever there. Any kind of tips of the trade? What would you advise our students who are listening to prioritize? How to start the conversation, what to emphasize, and so on? Either one can jump in.
Yeah, Jane, I'll take this one first if you'd like.
Yeah, go for
it. So you start off with small talk. You need to get to know who you're speaking with. What are they wanting to find out? And you can do that through small talk to start with. Where are you from? How long you've been with the company? What do you like? What do you don't like? It's okay to enter an interview asking questions first. There's no reason to wait until the very end to ask all of these questions, because it can help you define how you want to present the answers to their questions. That way you can work on the fly to adapt what you're going to say so that it's more receptive to that particular individual. A person from New York is going to have different priorities than a person from Texas, and that's okay. Just knowing who they are and how they got to where they got to can help you formulate a strategy for your interview.
Great points. Jane?
I feel like I kind of take the flip side on that a little bit, so I see an interview very much, you're trying to get to know the company and you're trying to get to know those people that you're working with just as much as they're trying to get to know you, so, I think, as Ryan says, it's so important to get to know who they are. So that way you're assessing internally as well to know, hey, is this going to be the right fit for me? Because oftentimes the goal isn't just, finding anywhere. You could walk in plenty of places and find a position, but is this the position I want? I don't think you're going to walk into a McDonald's and, sitting there talking to the local franchise manager and trying to get a cybersecurity position, right? So as we're sitting here talking and getting to know one another, it's trying to figure out, hey, this is the right kind of role for me. Are these the right people that I want to work with too? And it's always, that game of just what do we want to know, and how can we present ourselves the best way for what they're trying to accomplish.
Very good points. And, in a sense, there's a huge difference between two different kinds of people that might be interviewing you. One is the hiring manager for the company. Another one might be the program leader of a project that is looking to hire someone. Those are two very different people. And the way that you present yourself may change depending on who you're talking to. Are you talking to a general kind of HR person, human resources person that's looking for a fit with a corporate? Or are you talking to someone on a project? Any reactions to that distinction, or is there a third one as well in terms of personalities you might find when you open the door?
See, I've also had teammate interviews that were purely personality. They didn't want to talk anything work, and they set that stage from the beginning that, hey, we don't care what you do. We just want to see how everybody gets along and how you handle various situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jane, culture fit is definitely something that is a part of the interview process pretty significantly these days. They don't want people that are rocking the boat. They want people that are team players that are going to help the organization accomplish the goals that they're looking to accomplish. So that cultural fit is not only important to the company, but to you as well. If that is not a good culture, if that is not a culture that you can get behind, then that's not the company you should be working for.
Yeah. I hate to talk about homework, but I know that sometimes it's important to prepare for an interview, right? Like, what does the company do? And rather than to say, "Oh, I didn't know you do this. I hate that," I'm not interested. So, any advice in terms of how to prep for the corporate, both the corporate objective, but also the corporate ethos or the corporate culture? How do you figure it out before you're kind of plunged into it during the interview? We've got a couple more questions. Naya and Mindy, I know you've asked questions, so we'll get to them. Any advice there?
Google's your friend. A lot of times companies these days are actually put their corporate pillars on their website. They want their customers to understand who they are and what matters to them. And that's something that you can use as an interview candidate to get that same understanding. The other option too is begin to develop your network. The advantage that we've got now, LinkedIn today is a great source, and there are a lot of individuals in the community that are looking for individuals to mentor, individuals to help grow in their careers, and reaching out even cold to these individuals is not unacceptable in the LinkedIn space. I mean, certainly you want to explain who you are and what you're hoping to accomplish out of that relationship. But at the end of the day, it's definitely something that's not frowned upon. Another good way to develop your network further is look at local meetups, look at local conferences. There's a lot of these types of activities that are free to individuals, especially students, in terms of getting to participate in those particular meetups or conferences, and begin to speak to people. It's one of the hardest things. A lot of us are introverts by nature, and that's okay. But getting into these spaces and beginning to expand and meet people is definitely one way to kind of help you understand a little bit more about the companies that they work for if you're interested in potentially applying.
Great. Jane?
Honestly, I think Ryan really knocked that out the park. He hit all the highlights right there.
Great.
I think, just the only thing I would say is, hey, when you're talking to people, just be kind. It goes so much further than we forget sometimes.
Yeah, very good. All right, let's switch to another question that's come in from Naya Blade. What are the factors employers prioritize when evaluating cybersecurity projects? And what's the best way to secure internships or volunteer roles to gain hands-on experience and advance in cybersecurity? That's a big question. Lots of different undercurrents there that I see. So who wants to go first?
I think that goes right back to networking all over again. It's talk to people. So when you're wanting to secure internships or even like work experience, whatever it may be, oftentimes you need referrals within a lot of large organizations. And so as you're talking to people, you'll hear about roles as they come available. And, so maybe you're one of the first applicants as opposed to the last applicant, and you're able to just continue forward in in the interview process. So talk to them, and sometimes you may find out that, oh man, that place over there, you're going to work 60 hours a week and they haven't given any of their employees a raise in 5 years. Whereas another company, it may be, oh, you work 40 hours a week and they give you vacation and they're excellent to their employees. And so I think that's stuff, you want to know and consider as well.
Great.
Naya, from my perspective, the biggest thing that I look for is not what you know and not what you don't know. It's what can you know? What's your capacity to learn and understand? Most jobs that you're going to get, you're right out of college, they don't expect you to know much. They're going to teach you how to do the job. What they're going to evaluate is, do you have the ability to learn the job? And can you take the job? Can you take that role to the next level? Looking for that capacity to learn is a very crucial thing. And so kind of going back into what can you do, internships and projects are very important to kind of highlight what your intellectual capacity is. What did you learn when you were working on project A? Did you learn something new? Did you have additional questions afterwards? Did you take it to the next level? These are the types of things that interviewers, technical interviewers especially, are going to be looking for is, do you have the capacity to learn? And even better, if you have the capacity to teach yourself with guidance, that can show an employer that you're, a really good fit potentially for that role.
Great. The next question comes from Mindy, who's cheating a little bit. She's a little bit off the topic, but she's got a great question, which is a career changer and overwhelmed with the breadth of roles in cybersecurity. So I think we can take that on between the three of us. Any immediate reaction? I got some ideas too, but let's go.
Yeah, Mindy, I'm at the age where cybersecurity degree programs didn't exist. We had to navigate it just like you're navigating right now. Your experience in changing careers, not having a particular degree in this field is fortunately something that's not frowned upon. A lot of the senior individuals don't have degrees in this field. Funny enough, one of my best friends and greatest analysts that we have on our team, he has a geography degree. So the point is that you don't need to necessarily have that formal education to still get into this field. You can leverage what we just talked about, developing, working on your own individual projects, networking, going to conferences, learning more on your own. These are all types of things that show folks that you're willing and capable to learn the job that they want you to perform.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. My bachelor's degree is actually in exercise science, and I spent the whole time working in IT. And when I graduated, I was like, oh, I guess I really do like IT. I should probably just stick with this instead. And so that was the path that I went down, and then ended up getting my master's in cybersecurity. So I feel like there's a million different paths you can get down, or at least you can go down, and there's not a right or wrong way to do it, really, as long as you're willing to learn.
Yeah. Great advice from both of you. And by definition, Mindy, cybersecurity is broad. Cybersecurity has technical, psychological, health-related, crime-related. I mean, you can dump all sorts of things in there. But the important thing is to have the ability to stay with an issue, to have a natural curiosity. A friend of mine defined a great cybersecurity person for a job as one who can connect the dots when they don't exist. In other words, find patterns that don't exist, create things in your own mind, and then be able to articulate them and to articulate the impact of doing nothing or doing something about those events. So be fearless. Uh, by the way, I need to put in a pitch now for National Cyber League. One of the reasons that National Cyber League was created, I was part of the original founders in 2011, was to give students a chance to appreciate the importance of cybersecurity, both within a small, narrow area, like do a puzzle, break a code, or in a team approach. So the personal and the team approach that National Cyber League creates is vital to understanding how you approach cybersecurity as an ultimate profession. And we think that National Cyber League graduates are very well prepared for this insane world of cybersecurity, especially if you can prove it. We've got those reports that come out showing progress within a particular category and so on. Those are so important as you talk to a potential employer. So again, National Cyber League was created for exactly the reason of being able to justify and verify an interest in cybersecurity. And again, as you probably know, National Cyber League is attractive not only to community college and university students, but also high schoolers, because that's how they find out their passion. That's how they begin to hone their skills. So just wanted to mention that as a National Cyber League kind of benefit that is created. I don't know. I didn't ask you, Ryan, Jane, have you ever played the National Cyber League
Can't say
competition?
that I have, unfortunately.
Oh well.
Right there with them.
All right. I don't have any more active questions, so I'm going to go into a slightly different category, and that is you both talked about how important it is to be able to articulate something, to write something, a precise summary, to communicate better. If you kind of think hard, are there courses that I should be taking? Are there YouTube videos I should be watching to hone those kinds of skills of taking information, compressing information? They're not readily available, at the drop of a hat in a community college or in a university. You don't find this, how to abstract, how to speak management terms. Uh, how do you do that if you don't feel comfortable with yourself in those skill areas?
I think for me, one of the things I like to do is to find different books, that are written for different audiences.
Mm.
So, as I'm reading content that, specifically it's not geared towards like engineering or management, but it's geared towards C-level executives, it helps you understand, oh, this is some of the content that maybe they're consuming. And, this is how you speak to them. Oftentimes it's written in that similar language. And just trying to, how does the quote go? Like, know your why. So when you understand why you're doing something and you're able to communicate it, then I think that tells you a lot about, and other people, about what you know and what you can do.
One of my favorite organizations out there that deals with public speaking in general, that can certainly help. I've seen it help people. I've attended a number of the sessions as well, and I find them extremely valuable, is through Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a phenomenal organization, and it really helps you develop your confidence around speaking. Even if you don't know, they're going to put you into certain scenarios that you don't know anything about. You're going to have to speak to it. And you're not going to be confident. They're going to teach you how to be confident even in those particular circumstances. And going to Jane's point in terms of, trying to understand more about the C-suite and how they communicate. As an example, I had the opportunity to brief a board of directors a couple of years ago on a particular incident. I had to summarize 3 months of work down into less than 2 minutes and 3 bullet points. Working to make your language concise is how it's being consumed at a higher level. So if you're wanting to navigate up the ladder, beginning to work on your communication for that level above is going to help set you up for success.
Yeah, and there's nothing more dreadful than looking at 10 pages that you've written and deciding you got to throw away 9 of them. And it's not the first 9 or the last 9, it's 9 altogether, but you got to go into the 10 pages that you really worked hard to create and find out which sentences are redundant, which sentences say the same thing, what things must be brought to the top. And again, a really good guide star for me in my career has been understanding the other person. That's the most important thing. I even took a seminar a long time ago. It was called How to Understand Human Behavior and Motivation. And it really helped me because it basically said, what you think doesn't matter. What's more important in working with someone else is understanding their motivation. So you walk into a C-suite, like Ryan did, and you look around the table, and there may be a budget guy sitting down. There may be a lady who's in charge of HR. There may be a person who's in charge of global expansion and so on and so forth. Every time you look at them, you have to change what you say because they're not thinking what you're thinking right now. They're thinking their own anxieties. So if it's something that has a financial impact, look at the budget guy and say, this is the financial impact. This is what happens if we don't take action and so on. So reading the other side is so important, whether it's an interview or whether it's once you have a job and you're going to address your boss's boss, or everybody in the corporation about a mess that just happened isn't your fault. Jane, Ryan, we're coming up to time, and I'm going to give each of you like 2 minutes, 3 minutes to wrap up and remember and recall for the audience what you said. But before doing that, any comments about kind of knowing the other side?
From my perspective, fear is the biggest blocker for an individual's success. Just know that your fears are what they are, and everybody else has them as well. It kind of goes back into what I was speaking about earlier in terms of imposter syndrome. Those are normal and natural human emotions. All you can do is better prepare yourself to navigate through, and using some of the tools and some of the techniques that we talked about today is going to set you up for the successes in terms of navigating those conversations and that ability to communicate.
Great. Jane?
I think largely, one of the things we often talk about, I feel like on the job, is perfection is the enemy of done. I think everything can always be better. There's never going to be perfection, right? But is it done, and is it done well? I think as we keep that in mind, it allows us to give ourselves a little bit of grace when something's not perfect and we mess up. Maybe we lose our train of thought, or, even after we proofread something a couple times, there was a typo somewhere. Show yourself a little bit of grace and keep going. I remember when I was working in a gym at one point, we had to do sales and stuff like that. And they told us, they were like, they just need to tell you no at least, 2 or 3 times first. And then they always buy the membership. And I was so confused to that, and it wasn't, being that pushy salesperson. It was, hey, people have to also overcome it in their own mind, and don't be afraid to hear no. So when you have people tell you, no, you're not going to get this job or that job, just keep going. You're going to find the right one at the right time.
let me invite, if I can, Emily back on the stage with us. Emily, I know that Spirit Week is but only barely begun. So can you remind us of what else is in store for us, for the audience, in particular? I'll be watching too in the next.
Absolutely. Thanks, Costas. Yes, so this is just day 2 of a full week of events that we have for Spirit Week. Tomorrow we have another webinar. It's going to be a panel setup similar to like today. The topic is going to be how to stand out in internships, interviews, and in the cyber community. A lot of the things that were discussed today are going to be teased out tomorrow. We're going to have Franz Payer, Tristan Mesner, and Jasmine Jackson from the NCL board, who are going to be presenting about how to use the NCL scouting report, how to create a GitHub, which I think is a really helpful tool, especially when you're trying to stand out and show the work that you've done, especially in the NCL. And then we're going to also talk about passion projects, ways that you can volunteer within the cyber community, ways that you can just stand out and show your unique selves. So that is going to be happening tomorrow. We'll go ahead and put the links in the comments as well. Feel free to register. Once again, if you're not live, no problem. We send the recording for you as well. So I always suggest just to register, and that way you can definitely get the recording. And then on Thursday, we have a Chat with the Game Creators event. So the Cyber Skyline engineers are going to be taking your questions about all the different challenges that have been going on for this spring competition season. It's a really cool opportunity to connect with the engineers and really kind of tease their brains of how they got all those different challenges together and get some ideas of real world concepts and how the challenges are going to reflect what people do on the daily when you're in a cyber role. And we also have another CrowdStrike employee who's going to be joining us and really give a kind of a very unique lens onto the reality of how CTFs can really incorporate a lot of information for cyber roles. And then the last day on Friday is a really exciting day. It's going to be the award ceremony. That is when we're going to recognize the top individuals and top teams for the spring season, and really just give our gratitude for such an amazing season and all the supporters who help support the National Cyber League, and all the students who make it possible. So a lot of fun things are going to be happening. And I'll get back to you, Costas, but of course, if you aren't able to make it live, always register. And then that way you can go ahead and see all the recordings on your own time.
Great. Well, we only have 4 more minutes. So I'd like Ryan and Jane, why don't you put in an unabashed plug for your company? Your companies are great, global. People who are listening might be interested in what you do and what your company does. And wrap up the event.
Sounds good. Again, folks, CrowdStrike is a wonderful company. I've been working with them for nearly a decade at this point. The advantage too about CrowdStrike is it's not just doing DFIR all day, every day. If you want to be a vulnerability researcher, you can do that at CrowdStrike. If you want to work in a managed service provider in a SOC type of capacity, CrowdStrike has roles for those that are available. Please keep a lookout on our website for additional roles as they become available. And don't forget that there are internships that are available in many different divisions within CrowdStrike. So bookmark that page and keep an eye out for any opportunities that come out. Also, just for the benefit of the audience, I'm going to put my LinkedIn link in the chat here. Please feel free to hit me up, ask me any questions that you might have. Could be on this topic, could be on any topic. Happy to interact with students.
That's great, Ryan. And I should also point out that CrowdStrike has been a very proud supporter of the National Cyber League for years. So thank you for that support. Jane.
Yes, well, I mean, I think just as Ryan thinks for CrowdStrike, I think GM Financial is a fabulous company to work for. You know, I work with an amazing group of people that, you know, love to accomplish challenging tasks, but still remember that, hey, you know, we're here to empower the business and keep things moving. So I love a good challenge, and, you know, GM Financial gives me that every day. So, you know, you're welcome to go to the GM Financial website and see which roles are available. And if you have any questions, I'll paste my LinkedIn in the chat as well. and feel free to reach out anytime. I'm happy to answer any questions I can for you.
That's great. What can I ask more than two excellent panelists? So thank you so much for being here, for addressing all the questions of our audience. And of course, this video will replay many times over for students that were in class today and couldn't attend. And thanks for putting in the LinkedIn URLs in the chat. For myself, I want to log off by saying, please, we're excited that you support the National Cyber League, and now I'm talking to the audience. Continue to support the National Cyber League. Continue to challenge yourself. National Cyber League gives you a great opportunity to challenge yourself, to better yourself. It's not only about winning the other guy, beating the other guy, but more importantly, improving yourself and your set of skills and doing so in a quantifiable manner with those scouting reports. And I'm so glad. Tomorrow, I would urge everybody to tune in, or is it Thursday, to review the scouting reports. That's such an important vehicle when you walk into an interview. So with that, I think I'm ready to turn it back to our organizers and say goodbye. Emily, Ashley, any guidance?
Absolutely. Once again, thank you all for joining us, our amazing presenters, and thank you, Costas, for emceeing the event. We will certainly see you all tomorrow for ways to stand out, and wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, and we'll keep seeing you for Spirit Week. Bye, everybody.